All right. Welcome, everybody. I hope you can hear me, you can see my screen, and I'm here today together with Alex Tondo. Maybe, Alex, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Excellent. Go ahead, do a quick presentation. I'll
Sure.
follow up.
Yeah. So my name is Alex. I am from the Creative Cloud side of Adobe, and we are responsible for essentially the Experience platform, which consists of the CMS, which in this case is an Adobe AM Headless, and also the personalization platform, which for this we're leveraging AP or Target, depending on the different use cases. And so, sort of all of these pieces together, this is how we deliver personalization for Creative Cloud customers.
Excellent. Yeah. And myself, I'm the product manager for the Universal Visual Editor, which is the topic of this presentation. And I'm glad to be here together with Alex, who can share with you a little bit what they are trying to do and how the Universal Visual Editor hopefully can help them. So let's dive right in.
Sure. So one of the major benefits with using headless is the ability to iterate and develop very quickly. So without needing to worry so much about the presentation layer. Um, oh no, sorry, I thought there was an audio issue on my end, but it sounds like someone else is having some problem. Anyway, is the ability to be able to iterate and develop very quickly, without a lot of the sort of the cumbersome aspects around a full experience, especially within the editor. It also gives us the ability to do really interesting experimentation, and cater to a lot of different types of personalization that normally wouldn't be possible with a headful installation. Today, we are supporting like 40 million monthly active users. We have 800 plus different experiments deployed across CC, um, and it caters a lot to our revenue. So it's a very important part of personalizing to our customers. But it does present itself with some operational challenges. So while it is very easy to develop, go from proof of concept directly into a fully fledged product, it does have a fairly steep learning curve. And then this is really because once it's been developed and once we get it outside of the hands of a developer or an engineer, and we start to put it in the hands of, say, the authoring team or a growth or a product management team, um, they feel sort of disconnected between the content and where it presents itself in the interface. So this can be maybe a little bit challenging as well to do QA, especially as we start to incorporate like multiple layers of profile, and start to break up all of the different content into user segments, etc. It can get fairly tricky to orchestrate. And of course, you imagine we add localization where we're now multiplying by 19 or 26, and this can get fairly cumbersome. So the way that we create campaign content today really goes from a hypothesis or a design, which can take it's kind of a week into itself, just to sort of flesh out how we want to target, where we see some areas of softness, et cetera, and where we want to communicate on what channel. And then once that's been determined, we gather the design, the graphics, headline, copy, text, everything, and we spend maybe about say 3 or 4 days actually programming all of that content into AEM or in this case any headless authoring platform. Once that content kind of goes back and forth, we get it QA'd, sort of all the visuals. Uh, then we approve an English campaign, and that actually goes out into market, gets displayed to a test audience, and assuming that it's a winner, then we'll actually take that forward, get the content localized. But you can imagine that this entire process, this entire start to finish, can generally take between 3 to 5 weeks, depending on the complexity of the campaign. And so, and it's a lot of coordinating, right? A lot of coordinating between different teams, between a design team, between a copywriting or copy editing team, and then the actual we call them like technical marketers that are actually programming this content into the AEM authoring interface. Mm. So this is actually what the headless editor looks like. And so what we can do is our authoring team will actually copy sort of add all of the different strings, assets, imagery, and use this editor or the admin itself to actually define how the content will represent itself. So we will provide like analytics, tracking IDs. We'll create different variations of the copy as well, and all of that can be done here. So it's very flexible. It's very powerful, but it doesn't give the user really any context as to what they're doing and where where these strings will be applied until they're quite familiar with a specific channel or with a specific piece of content. So all of those contents which we saw in the previous screen, those will all be represented here. In Adobe Home, just to give the folks on the call a little bit of context, is a sort of like our account management for Adobe.com. And this is highly personalized for all of our users. We have broken down our users into different segments. We're able to cater to users um, across sort of kind of using different users' implicit and explicit signals to us. We can cater personalized content and sort of recommend them the next best action, so to speak. Um, and so that content that we're seeing in the previous slide actually gets translated into the content that we're seeing here through a React application. Now, the sort of the tricky coordinating part where that comes in here is as we start to add profile and as we start to add segmentation, while it's incredibly powerful and we're able to deliver like this one-on-one level personalization with our users, it also adds a layer of complexity where we need to create sort of the different.
Alex, I think you're breaking up. Uh, or is it just me? Mm,
Seems like it's stable again.
yep, you're back.
Okay, cool. Um, but yeah, so essentially, in order to create the environment where we can then visualize all of the copy that was created in AEM, we need to have the sort of corresponding profiles or corresponding place in order to see that. So this presents like I would say like an even more complex degree for the authoring perspective. So anyway, the way that we were thinking about taking this to the next level, the way that we were thinking about how could we make this like visually appealing also to the marketing teams or the authoring teams that need to leverage this platform was to incorporate a universal editor. So actually um, bring a WYSIWYG type of experience, an authoring experience, an in context editing experience to say any React application.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense because, I mean, as an author, it is really difficult. It needs quite a level of abstraction and knowledge about how all these contents that you're editing in the headless editor is coming together to generate this experience that you're seeing here. And it might be understandable how you can fix the individual strings, but then if you want to do more, if you want to have like these boxes to be ordered differently or to be having other further boxes there, like the ones we see, that's really requires a deep understanding of all these references and how they are working. And basically, as authors, you then frequently feel like you're left in the dark. You're tapping around, you need to try out things, and you have maybe a stage environment where you can try out how these things come together. But it is quite hard for an author to really, and they need a deep understanding also of all these content structure, how it's all coming together. So but the initial challenge for an author can just be to find the content that you want to edit. Sometimes it's just a string you want to change. And even just that, you maybe have multiple variations of this string. So even you search for it, you might not know which one is now the one that is presented. And yeah, just that's the initial hurdles that an author is confronted with, right? And then you don't see the context, right? If this string is displayed in one or a different context, it totally changes how it can be perceived by the visitor. You also, like I said before, struggle with the visual layout creation. You need to understand how the whole layout system works behind the scenes. You're then therefore lacking creativity because, if you're deep in the technical expertise, then it's harder to be creative and to just try out different layout, try out something. And the learning curve for a new author can be quite steep, obviously. So I mean, thanks to the universal visual editor, we're trying to make all of this easy for authors and for developers also. So let me walk you a little bit through this new world and what we are trying to achieve there. So first, we call that a visual editor because, it's in context. So you have the visual editing, live updates. You have really, you can see what you're doing. You can see the edits real time, the changes. It's intuitive to make layouts. And you get more creative that way. You get faster, more efficient. And I think the last point really is worth also to talk about it a little bit longer because in an enterprise environment, you want to have some kind of guardrails for authors so that they don't mess up with things. And the universal visual editor here is really strong at that it also allows you to define what can an author do, what can an author not do. Maybe you don't want them to be playing around with the fonts and the colors because they are imposed by the corporate branding guidelines. And so it's not just having a rich text editor where you can do anything. It is about also thinking what you want to let your authors do. And then on the other side, it's also a universal editor. And there it is because we are envisioning this editor to not just allow editing some kind of content, but any kind of content. So we're kind of in the process of making it also more flexible so that you can actually tap into other content backends. For now, it is mostly just AEM. The vision here is really clearly that we are not limiting ourselves only to AM content. So more will follow on that also for the universal editor. But what already is true today is that you can use any API to retrieve the content. It doesn't matter if you're using GraphQL or Sling models, or if you have your custom APIs there, that does all not matter. It also does not matter how you build your application, whether it is server-side rendered, front-end, client-side rendered, which framework you're using, if it's the latest framework that just came out yesterday, that all doesn't matter. And where you're hosting it also, that you maybe have it on your own domain, that the universal editor can actually remote load your application and still allow authors to edit it. And obviously all of that should improve the time to value so that you don't need to rebuild your application. You can reuse your existing application. You can instrument it with the universal editor easily. You don't have a whole SDK that you need to implement. It is actually much more straightforward than that. Maybe we have talked about it quite a bit, so it's maybe time to show what the universal visual editor is. And here I just have a simple application. And the idea is that as an author, I'm on this application. I maybe go around. I maybe, I don't know, navigate to a page. Whatever that page is, doesn't really matter. I can take the URL of that page, paste it into the universal editor, and that opens this page and allows me as an author to go right in and modify the text that I see there. So maybe there is a typo that I wanted to fix. And you see, I don't need to search for the content where it is. It is there on the experience and I can edit it. I can do the changes here. And if I want to remove something because I see there is something that shouldn't be there, I can do that and hit publish, wait for this to go through my pipelines, hit refresh on the other application. And yeah, the update is there. That's how easy we want it to be so that authors don't need to have a headache each time they want to do changes. And yeah, I mean, this is actually a content fragment in the backend, but it shouldn't matter. We can edit the same way if it's page content, like components in a page, or if it's a content fragment. We see here on the right the dialogue. So here in this case, the dialogue is actually the content fragment model that defines what dialogue there is. But we also have typically, if I go to preview mode, I can navigate. If I go back to the adventurers homepage here, we have here examples also of like components here at the bottom that we can edit the same way. You see here that we have very trivial dialogues for these ones. Here for the image, we have also quite simple things. But these are all actually components on a page. And if I do changes here, this goes into the page, whatever changes I do here. And I have here a content tree. This allows me also to do the kind of reordering that you might expect from page content. And you can do the same, actually the same kind of page or a component reordering you can also do with content fragments. So if your content fragments are stored as references in a list of content fragment references, then you can do a container like this. It doesn't need to be a container or a paragraph system in a page, because the same thing can be done with components in a content fragment or with content fragments. And yeah, simple content fragments here can also be edited. I can have the same page combining on the same page content from various locations. And I can here go ahead and do the edits that I want. So I can go to the properties of this content fragment and do the edits, or I can just open the content fragment editor if I want to actually switch to this interface. And I can also switch back to the universal editor thanks to the preview button here. If I click that, then I'm back here and I can do the edits there. So you see, it's a straightforward interface. It is helping the authors to do the changes how they want to do it, the way or simple way how they understand it without having to do kind of PhD of content structure, how you do it in your own organization.
Sorry, can you switch back just for a second?
Yes, please.
I feel like it's a good time to highlight also the publishing pipe is very flexible. So the way that we think about leveraging the universal editor, it's also highly customizable. So those preview buttons can be customized. The publishing button or publishing workflow can also be customized, as well as incorporating the concept of variations as well, can be customized to really extend this into sort of even into the growth marketing world, or into the authoring world, or into a visual representation of a segment of users. So this is just like the tip of the iceberg here. You can really get do some really cool stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I wanted to give you a little bit of insight how it's working now. I mean, it all relies on attributes that you add to your rendered HTML. And it does not matter if this annotation, if these attributes are being inserted client side or server side. That all does not matter. Basically the universal editor is listening at DOM changes. Each time the DOM changes, it will reconsider if these annotations have changed because maybe some new content has come into the view. Maybe you have, I don't know, unfolded something. Maybe you have switched to a different user and suddenly new content is showing up. And so the universal editor is just simply allowing you to edit the content that is displayed. However, that is being rendered doesn't matter. And the only thing that the implementation needs to do is kind of remember where the content came from so that it can put this item ID to reference where the content came from. And this will allow the universal editor to recognize that this is a piece of content that can be edited and to understand how it can be edited, which dialog should it show in the properties rail, and how it should be persisted when you're doing changes. And then you see you can have multiple pieces of content that can be in context edited, can be multiple text elements, can be images that can be in context edited. And the way the universal editor knows how to persist, this content when you do changes to it is through the item property attribute, which tells which property of this item ID it is that is displayed there. And therefore, if you do a change to it, where it should be persisted back. And that really leaves you full freedom as a developer to instrument or to build your application the way you want it. And you are not bound to any specific SDK that you need to implement. You're not bound to any specific framework that we're supporting. You're not bound to any specific architecture like front-end, client-side rendering or whatnot. All that matters is that this attribute is there in the DOM so that the universal editor knows what to do with it. And here we have a little bit of an architecture diagram to show you the to show you around through the whole place. So the idea is that you can have content in different locations. It doesn't really matter where you're having your content. So for now, we mostly support the two buckets here with AM content, like pages, experience fragments, and content fragments. But we're really envisioned to go beyond that and to also support other buckets there. And you retrieve your content through different APIs from these buckets. And your application is rendered at some point. However it is rendered doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that in your DOM, you have this instrumentation in place, meaning the attributes like the item ID, item prop, and so on. And then the universal editor opens your DOM in an iframe and allows the author to start doing in-context editing on this DOM. And each time you do a change, it will have a universal editor service which persists the changes, which takes basically the diff of what you have done. And you will have an extension registry with different plugins where we have for now the AM plugin that allows to persist this content back either to components in pages or content fragments. And that's it. It's actually really kind of simple and straightforward. The objective here is actually to be much more simple in the architecture than what we have had in the past with things like the SPA editor, where it was much more complex how things were working. And you had also to implement the whole SDK, which was very intrusive on how you have to build your application. Here, build your thing however you want. You can even take existing applications. You don't need to refactor them. Just remember where your content came from is the only important kind of requirement there. And here I have kind of a variation of this architecture that shows a little bit how we have this on the example from Adobe that we showed you before. And Alex, you can maybe walk us through that. What's different here is basically mostly here in the blue part with this personalization engine.
Yeah. So one thing I'm not sure if I mentioned it earlier or not, but the way that our Adobe Home, our sort of SPA is working is it's a React application that leverages a personalization engine to essentially determine which content and which variation of that content to display to the user. Um, and so in our architecture, what we did is we are integrating the universal editor with an existing application, an existing React application. It wasn't designed initially to work with universal editor, but mm, it's actually quite easy to implement, and we're going through that process now. The part that's quite interesting, I think, about the way that we leverage headless content is that these GraphQL endpoints actually pass through a personalization engine. So uh, even the having the universal editor either before the personalization engine or after doesn't really matter, because it can kind of live anywhere along the line and turn that render component into an in context editor, which is kind of phenomenal for us. So yeah, really looking forward to that.
Yes, and you can think of this personalization engine like an API gateway as well. So the idea is that you have this layer on top of our APIs that is maybe caching some of the content, that is maybe unifying the different backends that you're pulling content from, that maybe has some personalization logic inside of it as well to define which content now has to be displayed. And that all kind of belongs in the end to the application. Like Alex said, we could have put this personalization engine also into the yellow application box there, because it kind of belongs to the application and abstracts the different backends that you might have. And yeah, the important thing is that you still know where the content came from, and that you maybe have a single source of truth of your content. Like here in the case of Alex use cases, they are storing everything as content fragments, and you basically don't want to persist the content here back into the personalization engine. You want to store it back into a content fragment where it belongs to. So you really, that's the single source of truth. And the personalization or this API gateway, if it does cache some content, it really is just a cache. That's not where the content is originated from. And yeah, I mean, that's it. I mean, just to summarize here, the big differentiators that the universal editor brings to practitioners is that you have this direct in-context editing, that you don't need to first navigate to the content before you're able to edit it, that you can edit the content from different sources with a single compelling and consistent API, that you can still visually compose your content. You don't need to have a specific kind of content that lets you do the visual composition. So you're not limited to page content. If you want to create layouts, you could also create layouts from content fragments if you wish, like Alex's team is doing. And you can also visually compose third-party content potentially in the future. And yeah, you have this enterprise grade UI that's allowing you to scale in an enterprise well with authors that don't need to be super skilled and know every detail about how the content is structured in the backend. They can just go ahead and do the edits. You can enforce your branding guidelines. They don't need specific HTML expertise to do the changes and yet do visual editing. And I think all of this, I mean, we have a lot of competing products out there that do similar things than the universal editor do. As now it's really rising a lot, but none of them really has this panel of differentiating features that I think are unique and very interesting for enterprise level customers. And for developers, we also have a very unique
Sorry,
set
Gabriel.
of differentiators. Yeah.
I just wanted to, we just have a few minutes left. And there are some questions on chat.
Oh,
Uh,
sure.
do you want to answer some of those? And
Yeah. If we have some
good.
time,
Yeah.
yes. So
Yeah.
let me
Yeah.
just
We have,
in a second summarize this slide.
yeah.
So
Good.
as
Shoot.
a developer, you have free choice of technology. We talked about that. No SDK that is imposed. You can take your existing application and instrument it with the editor. It is actually quite straightforward to instrument it. It's not a big deal. And you can really also, as a developer, control what is editable. That's important. So it's not because your content comes from pages that you authors need to be able to drag and drop things around. It's really up to you to let authors do what you think makes sense for them to edit. You can control that in a very fine-grained manner. So that's it. Go ahead with maybe to this URL so that you can try out the universal editor. I will leave this up while we maybe go through one or two questions.
Okay. That sounds great. Yeah. And then, did you have the link also for the, to continue in case there's more questions on Experience League? There was a slide. If you don't have that, that's fine.
I
I'll
don't
look.
know.
Okay. I'll look for it and add it.
Thank you.
Anyways, so questions, when will Universal Editor be able to sync changes back to documents powering edge delivery service experiences? Is that a thing?
Yes, it is. We are already making it work with Excel sheets so that you can persist content like headless content that's coming from Excel sheets. We have on our roadmap to also support Word documents. That, however, might rather be second half of next year because we first want to GA something that is working well with the current set of features before we broaden the support to also support document-based, like Word-based auditing. But we do already support, to some extent, the Excel-based document editing.
All right. Well, that is, I think all we have time for. I want to thank you, and we've got the next session coming up in a minute or two. So we'll give a little bit of time buffer here. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise. This was a fantastic session. And yeah, all good. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.